Yep, I'm recording this off of hardware. Sorry about the little tag in the corner. But I figured we would play a little bit of winter games for this month's Wayback. It didn't release in February of 1980, but it's topical because the Winter Olympics are going on in Pyeongchang as I speak. And we're seeing the NES version here right now, but the Commodore 64 version was a huge part of my childhood. I loved playing summer games and winter games. I had Summer Games 2 as well. You can really see the difference between the NES version and here we've got the Commodore 64 version. I do prefer the Commodore 64 version objectively. It's not just nostalgia speaking here at all. After the opening ceremonies, we come to the menu screen. You can compete in all events, complete in one event, practice events, see the world records, which is just basically saved on the console, or watch the opening ceremony again. This is honestly the first time I've ever touched the NES version of this game, so I was kind of surprised that you could only play 2 players, and there were only 6 countries to choose from. On top of that, the name entry is awful. You can only go left or right. You have to scroll through it to get to the letters you want, and there's no rub or anything. So you can only put up to 4 characters in there, and if you mess it up like I did here, you just have to fill in the rest of the 4 characters. Then it cycles back to the beginning, and you can enter it properly. This was just really kind of jarring, and one of the things I enjoyed most on the Commodore 64 version was listening to all the different national anthems. And you can't really do that here. It only shows up after you've actually selected and ended. Switching over, I'll give you a quick look at the Commodore 64 version here. You enter your name. You can put in enough characters for a full name. There are quite a few different options for countries. Let's see here. You've got USA, France, Great Britain, USSR, the 1980s. So it looks like there's like 18 different countries. I always liked the Epyx one that they threw in there, partially because I liked the anthem. Once you've selected your name and country for player number 1, it just dives you right into player number 2. You can have up to 8 players on the Commodore 64 version. First event here is the hot dog, where you just have to basically do stunts in midair and land properly, trying to get the most points out of everyone in the group. And this is another one where the music is a jarring difference. That said, the gameplay is almost exactly the same. You push the D-pad in different directions and push the buttons to make different tricks go, and then you get a score. It's pretty straightforward. You just have to make sure that you're done doing your tricks with enough time to land with your skis firmly planted on the ground. Okay, that is just downright painful. In the Commodore 64 version, I believe this is supposed to be Flight of the Bumblebees. It is completely lost here. The gameplay here is pretty straightforward. You just press left and right with a rhythm. You can't just do it as fast as possible. You need to do it with a natural rhythm, like you're moving your legs, which is kind of neat. And it's also split screen for 2 players. So when you're playing just on your own, you have a computer player to play against. But this one was actually kind of fun because you really do have to get into that rhythm and just get to the end as quickly as possible. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just couldn't figure this music out. But there's the music for the good old US of A because, hey, look, I came in first. Yeah, there was no one else there. Next up, we have figure skating, which is the most frustrating of all of the events in this game. You, if you're good at Street Fighter, you might do okay at this. And I know that's kind of strange, but most of the jumps and spins and everything are basically like quarter circle and hit the button, or down, up, hit the button, or half circle and hit the button. There are different tricks that you'll pull off based on whether you're facing backwards or forwards. Some of the jumps will actually flip you around. If you're facing backwards, it'll face you forwards. If you mess up and try to do a backwards facing trick while you're facing forward, or vice versa, you will fall. And each fall docks you 1.2 points. So it's pretty unforgiving, and it's tough. You can see I've done a lot of just skating, and it really didn't do much. So yeah, not my favorite. I did like the bobsled though. This one was it's kind of neat because you've got this 3D-ish view up in the corner, and I know all of the action is only taking place on like a quarter of the screen, but it was definitely fun. The track is the same between both versions as well. This last bit here almost always gets me. There's a quick turn one way and then a quick turn to the other, and if you mess it up, you skid to a halt for another couple of seconds. It's kind of brutal. But after a little bit of practice, you can get the hang of it. The trick here is that you're actually pressing in the opposite direction of the wall that you're going up on, which kind of takes some time to get used to. But eventually you can get the hang of it. And that's all for the NES version, just those few events. I do want to thank Game Trade in De Pere, Wisconsin for bringing me and that cartridge together. Now we're going to switch over to the Commodore 64 version. This is the one. This is the stuff. This is the one that I grew up on. One thing I did like about the NES version, there was no load time in between the events. I literally cut out like 20 minutes of load time from the gameplay that I captured. But as you can see right off the bat, the graphics are already going to be far superior. Here, there's another option to, well, there are two other options. One, you can choose the number of joysticks you're going to use. You either use one or two. One, you just do round robin. Two will let you do some things like the speed skating at the same time. But the other one is compete in some events. And here you'll see another one of the major differences. There are more events on the Commodore 64 version. I'm only going to play, well, I'm going to play Hot Dog here because I wanted to show you a little bit of both. But, and then I'm also going to skip free skating, which is basically figure skating. I never really got what there wasn't much of a difference between the two. And then, of course, bobsled, because I love the bobsled. But the other ones that are different here are ski jump and biathlon. And we will get to those as the time comes. First off, we're going to go to Hot Dog, and man, I did okay on the NES version, but I kind of screwed up a little bit more on the Commodore 64 here. Next up, we've got the biathlon. For those of you who may not know, it's a combination of skiing and shooting. The controls are basically, kind of similar to the speed skating from earlier, where you just have to go back and forth with the controller to find a good rhythm to move forward. That's for the straight parts. You press up and down to use your ski poles on the slope, on the downward slope, and then you just have to go back and forth as fast as possible to get back up the hill. That, of course, raises your pulse, and when your pulse is high, your targeting reticle moves faster for the shooting segments. This is kind of satisfying. You actually press up on the controller to open the bolt, down to load it, and then you press fire. So every shot you miss, you get a small penalty to your overall time. But otherwise, I just loved this event growing up. There's variety to the different motions you have to do. The artwork is fantastic for the Commodore 64. I love that partially melted river there. And then the motions for loading the gun are really satisfying as well. This is one of the longer events, though, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to the last bit of skiing and to the finish line. There's the total time skiing and the misses tacked on for a total of 3 minutes 34 seconds. Next up we have the ski jump, and oops, we need to flip the disc. Yep, Winter Games came on a double-sided disc, which is probably why it's better than the cartridge for the NES. A lot more room to fit more stuff in. So on the ski jump, you've got a little tiny character to start out with here. But that's because you kind of need a lot of room on the screen to make your adjustments. You just need to basically keep your skis parallel and land, and there you go. Get your points for distance and style. This is another one where it's hilarious if you mess up. You can actually just flop right off the end of the ramp, but here you kind of slide to an inglorious stop if you actually make it off the ramp and then mess up. Yay, I got gold. Again. You know, even though I'm not competing against anyone, this is still a lot of fun. The events, I mean, it's basically a collection of mini games, but the events are still fun. Okay, I just wanted to show you a little bit of the Commodore 64 version on this, partially because of the music, but the graphics are much better. The sound effect of whooshing down the track is a bit better. My gameplay, not that much better, but it's just such a glaring comparison between the two, and sometimes it's pretty subjective as to which version is better, but here it's pretty objectively better. The last major difference between the two versions is once you've finished all of the events, you get final standings. Just a short little closing ceremony where it shows all the different people building up from last to first and then plays the anthem of the person who came in first. But it was missing, and I felt that loss. And our games have come to an end for this week. Thanks for watching. Click one of these links to watch some more videos. My next video will be coming pretty quickly, but I will catch you all next time.